And what we've seen over the last 20 years is Putin threatening literally everybody. Don't forget, it was about 15 years ago he threatened to use nuclear weapons against Denmark over some dispute. I mean, this is a guy who constantly makes the most outlandish threats in order to dissuade people from defending themselves. We need to stand with the Ukrainian people and demonstrate we're serious about it.
The Conservative leadership race continues, and it's a big couple of weeks as the remaining four contenders make their pitches to the party conference. The front-runner, Robert Jenrick, is calling for the contest to be sped up. So do the others agree? Tom Tugendhat, who's also in the running, and also the former security minister in government, now the shadow, joins us on the programme. Good morning.
Good morning, how are you?
I thought you were on a motorbike then, but it sounds like you are. Well, thank you. Thanks for being with us.
I'm not allowed to ride motorbikes anymore since I had kids. My wife told me that no motorbikes.
Well, exceptional timing from whoever is riding one noisily behind you. Robert Jenrick is calling for a shortened contest in this Tory leadership race and a TV debate, an interesting proposition, if you like. Do you agree with him?
Well, look, I've done TV debates for leadership hustings, and I'm very happy to do whatever is arranged by the party, because I think this is one of those moments where we've got to make sure we give the British people and, of course, the Conservative membership the opportunity to choose somebody who's going to serve the country, who's going to lead not just the party, but be ready to lead the country and to act in the national interest. And, you know, focusing on service and focusing on other people is exactly what this is about, particularly when we're seeing Keir Starmer has turned from service to self-service.
Do you think you've got it in you to win? I mean, you're trailing the pack at the moment. Do you think you can turn it around?
Not really. No, I'm not trailing the pack. I'm equal with James, and I'm gaining momentum. So absolutely, I can win. And what you're seeing here is you're seeing with a real choice being put to Conservative members of different people, all of whom are friends of mine, all of whom are offering a slightly different emphasis. But one of us has actually demonstrated consistently through polling and through ability to call things out that, I'm consistently ahead of the curve, whether that's on calling out China or Russia or Iran, whether it's about voting against vaccine passports, or in fact voting or not supporting the national insurance rise, which later became government policy. Consistently ahead and consistently demonstrating that I'm able to change the conversation and bring people alongside.
You say that you're gaining momentum. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, I was, as you rightly say, fourth, and now I'm third, so that's gaining momentum.
Okay, and have you added some new names to your list in the last couple of days?
Look, I have, this is, you know how this process works. I've got a bunch of people telling me how and when they want to go public, and it'll be up to them to decide how they wish to make their decisions.
Well, we'll keep an eye on that for conference. Of course, a big moment for all of you to make your pitch at Tory conference. We will be there with this show. You're very welcome to join us there if you've got the time, Tom Tugendhat.
I'm sure I will.
You were, though, the security minister. You're now the shadow. One of the biggest issues today is Ukraine. We were asking the government earlier about whether or not the UK should go it alone on Storm Shadow missiles. Do you think that would be a good move?
Look, I think the right thing to do is to support the Ukrainians in defending themselves and allowing them to use the ammunition that we've agreed to give them to do that, whether that's striking positions that are where the Russian troops are mobilizing and preparing themselves to attack and murder Ukrainian citizens. I think that's a very simple decision, actually, and I think it's a very clear one. We are seeing rockets and missiles fired within Russia, killing Ukrainian civilians. We need to make sure the Ukrainians are able to defend themselves, and that's why I support their ability to use these weapon systems.
So is the Prime Minister emboldening President Putin by not saying yes?
No, look, you stand up to bullies, you don't kowtow to them. And what we've seen over the last 20 years is Putin threatening literally everybody. Don't forget, it was about 15 years ago he threatened to use nuclear weapons against Denmark over some dispute. I mean, this is a guy who constantly makes the most outlandish threats in order to dissuade people from defending themselves. We need to stand with the Ukrainian people and demonstrate we're serious about this. Whether it's about people trafficking through Minsk into the European Union or through Libya into southern Italy, we have seen Putin weaponizing literally everything he possibly can to use against us. We need to stand up against him, and that's why one of the first things I did when I took over as chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee was call out Russian dirty money in our system and to try and end the sleaze that we've seen far too much of, not just in politics, but actually across the United Kingdom. We need to end it, and that's why I'm standing.
So can you explain to us, because you have got a unique perspective on this, you've read those security briefings that very, very few people will ever be able to read. And Labour are obviously, they're now in government. They can't really come on and explain exactly what's happening behind the scenes. Maybe you can. Why does it look like Keir Starmer is hesitating? Why does it look like we're holding back when what we hear behind the scenes is the UK wants this to happen? What's really going on?
Well, look, this is a political decision. I'm not going to talk about the secrets or the briefings that I got. I promised I'd keep the King's secrets, and I will. But what you're really seeing here is a vacillation over leadership. You're seeing a failure to make clear the commitment that the British people should have of standing up for freedom, standing up for our own interests and protecting ourselves by supporting our allies. And let me be absolutely clear that as leader of the Conservative Party, I am standing to be Prime Minister because I want to return this government to the service of the British people and offer the leadership in defending ourselves at home and abroad to make sure that we are always acting in the national interest. I'm afraid what we're seeing from Sir Keir Starmer is vacillation and self-service, not leadership.
Tom Tugendhat, who is, of course, running to be the Conservative leader. Thank you very much for joining us. Keir Starmer found himself in a war of words with Vladimir Putin at the end of the week after a blink-and-you'll-miss-it trip to Washington. Ukraine was top of the agenda, specifically President Zelensky's urgent request to use British long-range missiles to attack Russian territory. Well, Nick Thomas-Symonds is Paymaster General and a Cabinet Office Minister and joins us on the programme now. Good morning.
Good morning, Kate. Good to join you.
Thanks for being with us. Let's start with Ukraine, shall we? Because there are calls from former defence secretaries to go it alone and approve Storm Shadow for wider use. Can we, as the UK, do that? And will the government do that?
Well, look, I'm not going to comment, first of all, on operational matters like that. I think having an open debate about it only really benefits Vladimir Putin. What I would say is that already this government is providing substantial support to Ukraine. On coming to office, we confirmed the £3 billion a year, and that will continue annually for as long as it takes. We've also announced in recent weeks an additional 650 air defence missiles. When President Zelensky has requested additional artillery shells, we've again made arrangements so that that can be ramped up as well. And I think that if you look at wars, you look at conflicts, they're not won by a single weapon, a single system. What's important here is that we do continue to make clear we will back Ukraine for as long as it takes.
So can I take from what you've just said there, and I know that you're saying you don't want to have the full discussion in the open. I think people will probably understand that. But what you've said in answer is that when Ukraine has asked for things, we have given them. Should we hear what you're saying as an indication that the UK has not given up and that we may well see some movement on Storm Shadows in the weeks to come?
Look, as I say, I'm afraid I can't discuss that operational issue. This on Storm Shadows, this has been a quite long-standing request from President Zelensky. It goes back over a year. I think what you have seen in recent days is the Foreign Secretary and Tony Blinken jointly showing solidarity, visiting Kyiv, and also speaking to President Zelensky and the Ukrainian government as to what their needs are going.
Well, they've made clear what their needs are. I mean, President Zelensky has said very clearly he's disappointed that there was no agreement in Washington. What's our message to him now? Is it, just hold on?
Well, our message is we will continue to stand by him and stand by Ukraine. That's why we've continued, as I say.
But can you say that we're doing that? If you've just said to me in one breath, we listen to what they ask for and we grant their requests. You've heard President Zelensky. He's asking you for help and we're not giving it. Are you asking him to just hold on and be patient?
No, what I'm asking him to do, and indeed what the government is doing, is continuing with a dialogue. And that dialogue is one that we supported the previous government in conducting. That's why there's always been a bipartisan position on this, which I think is hugely important. We will continue that dialogue. But as we are talking in this interview, Kate, we are already, as I say, supplying the air defence missiles. We're ramping up the supply in terms of artillery shells, which has been requested as well. We continue to support in terms of money, continue to support in terms of training. So we will continue that support in a wide range of areas. And to the trip to the United States by the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary, this is really important as well, that the United States, incredibly close ally, the special relationship we have with the United States, whether it's about Ukraine, the Middle East, China, it's really crucial that we continue that close dialogue with the United States. That's precisely what the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary have been doing.
Yeah, and there are reports this morning that the US, and we are aware of them, that the US is the bloc here in terms of approving those Storm Shadow missiles. Is the other concern about nuclear fears? Because we've had some saber rattling from the Russians. There's potential for nuclear weapons. We know that Russia has been sharing nuclear secrets with Iran, for example. How concerned is the government about that?
Well, I have to say that I think Putin is just trying to throw dust in the air here to obscure the fact that he bears 100% responsibility for this war through unprovoked and illegal aggression. And
So is he
Putin's
faking it?
threat
Is he faking
well,
it?
his threats are nothing new, are they? He warned us not to send tanks to Ukraine. We sent them. He warned us not to send missiles to Ukraine. We sent them. This isn't the first time that he's threatened to use tactical nuclear weapons. The reality is he is a bully. His imperialist fantasies have killed or wounded over 600,000 of his own soldiers and frankly brought shame on his country. So no, the government will not be intimidated by Putin or his bluster.
What's the long-term plan here, finally? Are we pushing, because it feels to me like this conversation is coming to a head on all sides. Are we pushing for a deal on paper to end this war? Is that something we're talking to Ukraine about now?
No, we are saying to Ukraine that we will be with them for as long as it takes. And this kind of debate, it is about Ukraine. It's about Ukraine and its own destiny, not some sort of construct being pushed from outside. And our message to Ukraine, which has been communicated when we were in opposition and indeed in government, is that we will stand alongside Ukraine for as long as it takes. We can't have a situation in the 21st century's international order where you have one country invading the sovereign territory of another country.
But forgive me, Nick Thomas-Simmons, that wasn't my question. My question was about, will this end in an agreement? And if it does, some say that Ukraine will have to compromise and cede some territory. Would the UK accept that? Is that a good position for Ukraine to be put in?
It's a matter for Ukraine, is the point I'm making to you, Kate, that it has to be for President Zelensky and indeed the Ukrainian people to deal with those sorts of questions. The last thing we would want, as has happened in previous conflicts of the past, is some sort of imposed settlement from outside. It is a matter for President Zelensky as leader of the Ukrainian people, but we will continue to support them for as long as it takes.
More broadly, the Prime Minister is heading to Italy. He's heading there today. We know that part of the conversation will be around Storm Shadow. I don't want to get into that again. But the other part of the conversation with Italy, with Giorgia Meloni, will be about immigration. There are incredibly sad reports that there are a number of dead people in the Channel this morning. They're trying to cross the Channel to arrive here in the UK, likely in small boats. Is the UK considering processing migrants, like Italy does in Albania, offshore?
Well, firstly, can I just say once again the awful loss of life that we've seen in the English Channel overnight, and it only underlines the urgency, the imperative to take action on this. That is why the government has already started the process of recruiting the Border Security Commander to bring together all those different agencies that are working in this space, from Crown Prosecution Service International to Border Force to police to intelligence agencies, working with Europol and international partners to bust this vile trade of criminal smuggling.
And will considering processing migrants in Albania be part of that plan?
No, I mean that's the Italian scheme. It's a very different type of scheme to the Rwanda scheme that the previous government had and wasted over £700 million on. But it's a broader point about a recognition that irregular migration is a continent-wide challenge. Yeah. And Italy obviously has had particular issues in terms of people crossing the Mediterranean.
So would we consider it?
Rather like we have our relationship, our agreement with France. Italy has in place, for example, agreements with places like Tunisia, Libya. What's Italy doing in terms of its upstream work, in terms of the Balkans, and the Balkans is, of course, one of the, I'm afraid to say, people smuggling routes that's regularly used. So it's a broader point about what discussions we can have to, of course, learning from each other, but crucially, how we can have this discussion about being a continental-wide challenge, because people who come through those routes across Europe are the people who are ending up in the English Channel.
Yeah.
That's why it's our interest to be
Okay, so
working.
I take from that we may well consider it. It might be part of those discussions with Italy over the next couple of days. There's one more story that I want to ask you about today, which is the allegations that Keir Starmer didn't declare clothes given to his wife. Why is his wife accepting free clothes in the first place?
Well, some countries have a particular budget, don't they, for their leaders and their spouses to be able to look their best when they're representing the country. They have that in the United States, for example, for the president and the first lady. And we, whatever your political persuasion, our elected prime minister and spouse do represent us on the international stage. And of course, we all want them to look at their best. In respect of the declaration, when the prime minister took office, advice was taken as to what was appropriate and needed to be declared. There was then some doubt about that, and further advice was sought in recent weeks. That's why we see the stories we do today. But the Prime Minister is someone who has twice sought out advice. He's being transparent, seeking guidance as to what was appropriate to do. You'd hardly call this hiding something.
Doesn't it look a bit strange, though? I mean, let's be honest here. The Prime Minister's pretty well off. It's a well-paid job. He's getting free glasses. It just feels a bit wrong.
Well, it's something that happens in other countries.
I'm not asking you, forgive me, Nick Thomason, I'm not asking you about other countries. I'm asking you directly. Do you think it's okay for the Prime Minister, who is incredibly well paid, to get free glasses?
It is permissible for him to do this. There's no suggestion that this is something that's somehow inappropriate.
I know it's permissible. I'm asking you, do you think it feels all right? Because other people think it looks a bit weird.
No, I do want the Prime Minister and Lady Victoria to look at their best on the world stage when they're representing us. And just as other countries give support for their leaders to look at their best, I've no issue with the Prime Minister and Victoria looking at their best on the world stage. And he is somebody who has twice here sought out what was the appropriate declaration to make. It's actually seeking transparency rather than the other way around.
You keep saying that they should look their best, and that's not really the point. The point is where the money comes from. The point is where the free clothes come from. The point is who is donating them. Do you think it might be a bit better, a bit more above board, if we set a budget for this?
Well, no, because then you get into a debate, don't you, as you often do with the funding of political parties, as to whether you do it by the state. And I think you would have legitimate questions then about whether it should be the taxpayer funding this. But what's happened here is we've had, and again, it's all above board. The donation is declared. Lord Ali has been a long-standing donator to the Labour Party, has done it over a number of different leaders, not simply Keir Starmer, and has been a member of the House of Lords since 1998. He's someone who's given over a quarter of a century of public service.
Nick Thomas-Symonds, Paymaster General, thank you for giving us your time this morning.
Kate, you, as we've been saying, you've just been in Washington, you've been speaking to Americans, you've been speaking, obviously, on the plane to the British delegation. Where do you think we are in this whole question of whether or not Britain should give permission to Ukraine to use Storm Shadow weapons?
I think the UK would be perfectly happy to do that. I think there are a number of different conversations that have to happen before it can be agreed. I think very unlikely that we would go it alone. Some of those conversations are likely to happen before the UN General Assembly in New York. So those would be with, France, Germany, Italy, others. I think the bigger conversation is about where this is all heading. And I think that's why that question of endgame, is this actually an agreement at some level between Ukraine and Russia is quite important here, because it's right to say that this conflict will not be solved by Storm Shadow missiles. It is also, though, an indication of how much support there is for Ukraine in very difficult circumstances. And I think that's why there is such a focus on it. There is real hesitancy on the part of the Americans about where it takes this conflict in the end. And I think that's the conversation that is also happening behind closed doors.
But as I understand, there are also some just technical questions that, if Keir Starmer can't really say, it's okay today, use the weapons, because they're not ready, or...
Well, you need the support, so you need the maintenance. Maintenance is a big question when it comes to these weapons. You need to be able to direct them properly. And, there's a real determination from the UK side, speaking to UK defence experts, who say if these were granted for use, because they're already being used, it's important to say they're already being used in Ukraine. What we're talking about is using them to hit targets deeper inside Russia. They have a 190-mile range, these missiles.
Yeah, they were used against Crimea.
Exactly, they were used in that region. So if you do grant their use inside Russia, the targeting has to be very specific and it has to be very accurate. And I think that's the wider question is about the data and the GPS information that's needed to guide those missiles. That is just as important. And as you say, that there are big questions for America on that.